The topic today is the four treasures of tribulation. Now, the four treasures, the one, that tribulation will strengthen us, will assist us in turning more to God. That's number two. Number three, will help us to detach from the material world. And four, help us focus on what our real priorities are. Those are the four treasures. Now let's talk about the nature of the tribulations, the nature of the suffering. There are many forms that suffering inevitably comes in this life, and no one escapes the suffering of life. It could be mental suffering, anger, jealousy, desiring wrong things that are bad for us, resentment. And when we talk about anger, we're also talking about not only mental suffering, we also are talking about physical suffering, because we know for a fact that anger leads to cardiovascular complications and puts people more at risk for strokes and heart attacks. And so that illness in itself is one of the sufferings of this life. Aging, death, separation from loved ones. It could be through death, or it could be a loved one moves somewhere, goes somewhere we can't see him or her. We miss that person. We want to be able to see them in person or hug them. We can't do that. These things are inevitable, especially in today's society where we're so mobile and people don't stay in the same hometown anymore. People move far away, continents away. And so that's a tremendous loss. And another type of the suffering is the changing of times. Everything's always changing. The society changes, so people feel insecure. And the insecurity is a form of suffering. The changing could be a change in the economic climate, factors beyond any one person's control. The changes could be due to aging. The changes could be manifold, even simple changes like putting on weight and then finding, well, your pants don't fit anymore. Even that's changed. You can't get into your clothing anymore. There's changes happening at every level where we're powerless to stop it. And therefore we have the insecurities. So we live in a changing world. Everything that is of matter is transient. You have wealth. Wealth is lost. In fact, most millionaires have gone bankrupt twice. They had the wealth, they lost it. You have people who are poor become rich, and then they weren't prepared spiritually and mentally to deal with it, and they become exploited, and people make friends with them just for the money, and so they feel used and abused by it. So even that which is sought in the material world often leads to suffering. There's no end to it. The jealousy, which could just eat up a person's health, eat up the organs, also causes alienation in the relationships, especially if it's excessive jealousy. So the jealousy in itself is another form of the suffering, and the relationship suffering. Any husband or wife inevitably are going to have serious conflicts. There are going to be misunderstandings, very serious ones at times. And so they're going to suffer because the person you're most dependent on, you're going to be estranged from a period of time, or even might be momentarily an enemy. If you're angry at that person, really angry, the person might even be perceived as an enemy momentarily. So this is, again, a huge loss and another form of suffering. Or it could be a business partner, and you feel exploited. You trusted the person, and you felt, gee, they ran off with the profits, or they did something you didn't know about, and you feel betrayed and taken advantage of. And then there's this type of suffering that can happen in a business relationship. We look at the suffering from health and death. I mean, the death in this life is inevitable, the decline, at whatever age, and particularly then if it's a health issue of our children. I have a patient whose 7-year-old has cancer and is on chemo and radiation and goes there every day, and he's suffering. He was so joyful the child was born. What a great joy. And then 7 years later, diagnosed with cancer. So that which was joy in the material world, now you have the suffering of one of the worst afflictions that can happen, namely the endangerment of our children, or even, God forbid, even the death of a child, the worst thing that can happen to a parent. So that we rejoice in the birth, and then also could lead to tremendous afflictions and suffering in life. Loss is inevitable. Loss of health, loss of loved ones, people then watching themselves decline. People in their youth say, well, I can eat anything. I can do anything. They get older. If I can't eat this now, I get indigestion from that. I have lactose intolerance. I have sodium intolerance. I have to watch what I eat. I can't go to restaurants anymore because they put sodium in it. I have to eat at home. Gee, I used to be able to really walk this distance. Now it's trouble walking, and people just watching themselves declining, the loss that happens. That's inevitable. There's certain things we can do to preserve our health in terms of spiritually and mentally and exercise and proper nutrition. But ultimately, there is that loss and the decline that's inevitable in this life.